What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another episode of Set Point. I am super excited for this episode. Do you want to know why? It is NCAA Tournament time, ladies and gentlemen, volleyball fans all over the world. I am super pumped for this episode of Set Point. The NCAA Tournament has begun, as well as the NIVC Tournament. We are underway in the NCAA Tournament. It started yesterday with 8 amazing matches, which included 2 of the national seeds that played yesterday. Actually, 4 national seeds. But once again, it is great that the NCAA Tournament is here. It feels like Christmas because it is nearly Christmas time. But I am very, very excited for this tournament. It's probably the most anticipated tournament of the year. I cannot wait to get in. Without any further delay, let's dive on in like a libero does when it comes to going for the ball. Alright, everybody. How's it going, everybody? Once again, this is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, coming at you with another episode of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in. We've had a little bit of some technical difficulties this week, but that is alright. We are here right now, and I am ready for the NCAA Tournament. So without any further delay, let's get into the field of 64. That's right. Now it's win or go home time. You lose one game, you're out. You win, you go on to possibly play for the NCAA Championship. Basically, you just gotta win, and win some more. You basically have to be like DJ Khaled. Win, no matter what. If any of you are still fans of him. But regardless of that, now let's get into the field of 64. Starting with the top left corner. Starting with the number 1 overall seed, Baylor, facing Sacred Heart. Then we have Stephen F. Austin against USC. Marquette versus Dayton. Wright State versus number 16 seed, Purdue. Shout out to those Boilermakers coming out of nowhere. Wright State coming out of the Horizon League, facing Purdue. Number 9, Kentucky against SEMO. We have Northern Kentucky against Michigan. Colorado State against South Carolina, and Winthrop against Washington. Now for the bottom left corner, we have number 5 Nebraska, last year's runner-up, against Ball State. University of Northern Iowa against Missouri. University of San Diego, shout out to the Toreros, against Washington State. Northern Colorado against Hawaii. Number 12 Hawaii, for that matter, the Big West Conference champion. Number 13, Texas A&M. Who saw this one coming? Texas A&M. Shout out to H-Town Blake Henley versus St. John's. Oklahoma versus Rice. UCLA versus Notre Dame. And Illinois State against number 4 seed Wisconsin. Now for the top right-hand corner of the bracket. Number 3, Stanford, the reigning NCAA champion, against Denver. Georgia versus Cal Poly. Utah versus Illinois. New Mexico State against BYU. Number 14 BYU. Number 11 Penn State versus Princeton. American versus Towson. Cincinnati versus VCU. And Howard versus number 6 Pittsburgh. And now to conclude the bracket, we have the bottom right-hand corner. We have number 7 Minnesota against Fairfield. Iowa State versus Creighton. UCF versus Florida State. Alabama State versus number 10 Florida. Number 15 Western Kentucky versus Kennesaw State. Samford versus Louisville. UC Santa Barbara versus Texas State. And Albany versus number 2 seed Texas. Those are your 64 teams. Congratulations to those 64 teams that made the NCAA Tournament. Here's the applause button for y'all. Alright, so actually some of these matchups started yesterday. 8 matchups got underway yesterday. And we'll start from the bottom left-hand left-hand corner. First up was Texas A&M. Let's go over the matchups that happened. First up is Texas A&M versus St. John's. Okay, so St. John's. For those of you that don't know, St. John's went on its little late season tear, winning the Big East Conference after upsetting Creighton and after upsetting Marquette as well. So those were two very impressive upsets. I didn't know the Big East honestly, I'm going to be real with y'all. I didn't know the Big East actually had a conference tournament. I was wondering why Marquette was playing Villanova, but that was the reason why. So that's kind of my fault. That was a dirt moment for me. But anyway, that's besides the point. Texas A&M is living up to its hype. You know, they come from the very tough Big 12. I'm sorry, they come from the SEC. I'm sorry, not the Big 12. I'm thinking of Texas. Texas A&M comes from the SEC, home to Florida and Kentucky. Texas A&M actually upset Kentucky this season. So big ups to the Aggies, man. They proved themselves worthy enough of taking down St. John's. And St. John's, you know, going on that upset tear of taking down Marquette and Creighton on back-to-back nights is quite impressive. Just goes to show you that the postseason is a whole different animal. So Texas A&M actually swept St. John's yesterday. I was not too surprised. I was morally surprised that it was a sweep. I thought St. John's was going to have to go 4 or maybe 5, but you know, Texas A&M to me was skeptical. I was kind of wondering why they were the number 13 seed. I don't know how they got seeded, but they definitely have an impressive resume. You know, being from the SEC, you're battle tested night in and night out against teams like Florida and Kentucky. So it's very impressive on Texas A&M's part. So they're going to move on to the round of 32, where they will play Oklahoma or Rice, which we will dive into that matchup as well. Rice pretty much swept away Oklahoma, so we won't get the Big 12 versus the SEC. But Rice, this little team that upset Texas way back in like September, I believe, this team has been very impressive this year. I am very impressed by Rice. They did have a little bit of a tough one against Western Kentucky in the American Conference, but overall, this Rice team continues to get the job done. I don't know what to say about Rice, but they are on one. I think this is the dark horse. This could be one of the dark horses of the NCAA tournament, and for good reason. I mean, Rice is just good, man. You know, many people haven't really heard of them, but they're good. Put some respect on their names. So it's going to be Texas A&M and Rice in the second round. I'm actually going to go over the second round matchups tomorrow. I'm going to have another episode of Set Point tomorrow on Saturday. I believe that's going to be at 11 a.m. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll see. But I guarantee you there will be an episode of Set Point tomorrow. So anyway, now let's get on to the other matchups that happened yesterday, starting with UCF. I actually picked Texas A&M and Rice to win it all on the defining moment yesterday. If you didn't catch that episode, go check out that episode. That was the special Hall of Fame edition of the defining moment. Feel free to check that out and all the other shows on IE Sports Radio. Once again, thank you to those that are supporting. Now let's get on to the second batch of matchups that happened yesterday, or the third batch of matchups, starting with UCF and Florida State. I was really surprised that UCF actually pulled off the victory. I mean, don't get me wrong, UCF is an impressive team. They've been on a tear lately, you know, winning their conference tournament and taking down Cincinnati. But, you know, Florida State has always had a great team, and they even had that big upset win against Minnesota early in the year. So to beat Florida State, that is UCF's first win over Florida State in 18 tries. So that's very impressive by UCF taking down University of Central Florida, taking down Florida State. It's a really good win right there. It's a quality win right there, considering Florida State plays in such a tough conference, being the ACC, home to Pitt, and a few other teams. So UCF takes down Florida State in 5 sets. That was the only 5-set match that happened yesterday, and currently the only 5-set match to my knowledge, unless someone else went 5 sets. But that's besides the point. UCF will take on the winner of Alabama State and Florida, which we're going to dive into that matchup right now. Alabama State versus number 10 Florida. Florida pretty much was Florida. They lived up to their reputation. You don't take down Florida that easily in the Swamp. Alabama State gave it their all, but their all wasn't enough. Florida just straight up took them to the shed, swept them away, and Florida's going to advance to the round of 32 where they will play UCF tonight. So that's really cool. That's really cool. I think they play tonight. I think it was tonight or tomorrow. Some of these matchups are starting tonight and then we'll be playing tomorrow, and then some of these sites will be started yesterday and then we'll play tonight. So there's that. All right. So now let's jump into the next. Let's jump into matchup number 5, being Western. Oh, by the way, I picked Florida State to try to beat UCF. I was totally wrong, but that's a tough one. UCF is kind of skeptical for being in such an interesting conference, but this is a pretty good UCF team. Florida State's always been the juggernaut. Maybe it's an ACC thing, but this was not Florida State's year, especially. But and they had such high hopes considering they pulled off the upset against Minnesota early on in the year. But maybe that was because Minnesota hadn't found an identity yet. So I don't know. All right, now let's move on to number 15 seed Western Kentucky against Kennesaw State. I chose Kennesaw State, and I have no idea why. I forgot how good Western Kentucky was. But Western Kentucky swept away Kennesaw State. I really don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I was thinking Kennesaw State was going to be a dark horse, but I forgot Western Kentucky is really, really good this year. They took down Rice, so Western Kentucky took them down in straight sets, and they will advance to the second round of the playoffs, or to the NCAA Tournament, the round of 32. They will play the winner of Samford or Louisville, which is a matchup we're going to get into right now, which is Samford and Louisville. Louisville swept away Samford. This was no real surprise, considering Louisville is just so battle-tested. Samford, I believe, came from the... I kind of forgot where Samford came from, to be honest, but I will say this, I knew Louisville was going to straight up win that one, because they are a very solid team. They come from the ACC, and Samford to me just wasn't battle tested enough. Louisville taking on teams like Boston College, Georgia Tech, Pitt, Florida State, those teams battle it out every single night. And I really did not know what to expect from Samford, so I just went with the safe pick of Louisville. Louisville advances to the round of 32 where they will play Western Kentucky. That should be an interesting matchup right there. Battle of two Southern teams. All right, now let's get into the final 2 matchups. First off being UCSB and Texas State, UC Santa Barbara. Now, UCSB, before I saw Texas State, and I've seen UCSB play. Texas State obviously won the Sun Belt Conference and in their little division, and they won the Sun Belt Conference Tournament. Now that was no surprise, because they have a really talented player in Cheyenne Husky, who's a senior, and they have a coach who has coached there for 40 years, being Karen. She's some really nice gal as well. She's forever young in my heart. She's a real coach. She's the real one. And as for UCSB, this is their first NCAA Tournament appearance since 2013, when they tied for the Big West Conference Championship with Hawaii and Cal State Northridge. Now, I was very skeptical of picking UCSB. I did pick UCSB to win this one, but UCSB was very skeptical, considering they had such a bad loss against Long Beach State. I didn't see that matchup, but I saw the recap, and then I saw some of the replay, and, I was like, do I really want to pick UCSB? And then I remember from when Texas State took on Long Beach State that Texas State had to go 5 with Long Beach State, which beat UC Santa Barbara. So I chose UCSB to win this one, and as I did see UCSB Texas State, that was kind of my matchup to watch for. I know it's a little bit of a country bias when it comes to California, but Santa Barbara being in the same conference as my school, being Long Beach State, was something to watch for. And this is UCSB's, like I said, first appearance in the NCAA tournament since 2013, and it's so weird to see more than one Big West Conference team. There are 3 Big West Conference teams in the NCAA tournament. Yeah, there are 3 Big West Conference teams in the NCAA tournament. There was Hawaii, who won the conference, Cal Poly, who finished second, and UC Santa Barbara that finished third. I was kind of surprised to see Santa Barbara get into the NCAA tournament, considering, I had high hopes for them in the Big West Conference, and then they lost to Hawaii twice. They lost to Cal Poly, they lost to Cal Poly on the road, which was no big surprise. And they lost to Long Beach State. I thought the Long Beach State loss was going to cost them dearly, and that was just a bad overall game. But I guess Santa Barbara managed to clean up their act by winning out the rest of their games. And I guess the tournament committee deemed UCSB worthy enough of being in the NCAA tournament. It's kind of a surprise because I have a few teams in mind that probably could have gotten in the tournament, but I'll get into that a little later. As for the matchup between UCSB and Texas State, UCSB actually won that one. Santa Barbara won and beat Texas State. I was very surprised at this match. The first set between Santa Barbara and Texas State, Texas State went on a run, Santa Barbara went on a run, Texas State went on a run, Santa Barbara went on a run, and then Santa Barbara just closed out the match, or closed out the set with some great gameplay from Lindsey Ruddins, who is just a stud volleyball player coming from Elisa Miguel in Southern California and Orange County. Santa Barbara took the first set 25-21. Then in the second set, Texas State just started straight up just balling out. Cheyenne Husky was getting hers, and as well as other players such as Janelle Fitzgerald. Janelle Fitzgerald actually led the team in kills with 12, which was very surprising because, the first option is always Cheyenne Husky. Maybe Karen Cheesum, the coach, wanted to get Fitzgerald involved because every team knows to go out. Every team that's faced Texas State or that's scouted Texas State knows to go after Cheyenne Husky. But Fitzgerald was their second best option, which is good. It's always good to get other players involved. Otherwise, if you're a one-player show, you're more times than not it's not going to be pretty for you. So as for the second set, Texas State actually went up 19-13 at one point in the second set. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, this one's over. And then suddenly Santa Barbara is just clawing their way back. It's that 19-13 one was what dwindled down to 19-17. Then eventually Santa Barbara went up 20, I think it was 21-20. And I think they went up 22-21 at one point, and then closed out the match with 3 straight points. And I was very impressed. In case you're wondering, once again, Texas State led 19-13 at one point in the second set, and then Santa Barbara turned on the Jets. That's basically a 12-3 run. I said it was 12-2 run. That's a 12-2 swing right there. So. And, Santa Barbara took set number 2, 25-21, just like the first set. So, Santa Barbara's up 2-0, and I'm thinking, did I miss something? Because I know Texas State is good. I've seen Texas State play. Those players work hard. But one thing that struck me as odd is that Cheyenne Husky, Santa Barbara did a really good job of limiting Cheyenne Husky. Cheyenne Husky only had 9 kills, but had 7 hitting errors and hit only 50 for that match. 50. 0.05. So, 0.050. So, that was that it just wasn't her day. And, you're doing a lot of good things if you're pressurizing the best player on the opposing team to making a lot of hitting mistakes, or you're blocking her really well. So there's that. So third set, Texas State starts out strong, and then they pretty much they never really trailed. They were in no danger of losing that set. They knew their season was on the line. Santa Barbara tried to make a little bit of a run, but it wasn't enough, as Texas State took the third set 25-20. Santa Barbara still had the match 2-1. Then the fourth set, that was pretty much Santa Barbara's. That's when Santa Barbara hit their stride, as the Gauchos went out to a 6-1 lead. Then they went out 12-6 at one point, and then suddenly that 12-6 run, or that 12-6 score, turned into 19-6. Santa Barbara went on a 6-0 run. This was just a match full of runs when it came to Santa Barbara. Every time Santa Barbara went on a run, they were practically invincible. They just did not have any case of slowing down. There was just no way they were going to slow down. And eventually Santa Barbara closed out the match, and they took the fourth set 25-14, winning the match 3-1 over Texas State and advancing to the second round. That's actually UCSB's first NCAA tournament win since 2004, so that's very impressive. 15 years since they last won an NCAA tournament game. So let's hit the applause button for Santa Barbara real quick. So yeah, once again, that's very impressive by Santa Barbara taking down Texas State. I do feel bad for the Bobcats and Texas State, but they really had a great year. They'll get they'll get back to their they'll have a deep run one day. I know it, because as long as Karen Cheesom's at the helm of that program, they're not going anywhere. So Santa Barbara advances to the round of 32, where they will play the winner of Albany and Texas. Let's just say Texas just took Albany to the shed. It was basically just straight up a perfect overall performance for Texas, as they swept Albany, and they will move on to the round of 32, where they will play UCSB. I'll get into those second round matchups tomorrow. I'll go over those second round matchups tomorrow. Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to go over them today, but there's still some first round matchups going on. So as for the first round matchups, I actually did these picks in advance, but we had technical difficulties. I'm not going to get into what happened, but we had some technical difficulties when it came to going live. But here are my predictions. So let's start with the top left hand corner. Baylor versus Sacred Heart. I went with Baylor because, there's no, number one overall seed, Baylor. You really think I'm going with Sacred Heart for this one? No offense to Sacred Heart, but I got Baylor winning that one. Now, Stephen F. Austin versus USC. USC had me very skeptical. They lost to Oregon, which was not a good loss. Oregon finished near the bottom of the Pac-12. And Stephen F. Austin just pretty much blew by everyone in their conference. I believe Stephen F. Austin only has one loss this year. I think they have the highest winning percentage of any team in this tournament, other than like Pitt. I think Pitt and Stephen F. Austin have the highest winning percentages in this tournament. So as for Stephen F. Austin and USC, this one's tough. I'm going with USC for this one. I'm going with USC in the so-called upset win over Stephen F. Austin. I think USC is more battle-tested, considering they had to, because being in the Pac-12, they had to grind out some of these matches. I think a majority of their matches were not decided in sweeps. There were a couple times where SC got swept. I think they lost to UCLA in straight sets, which was not fun for USC. And they swept Oregon, but most of their matches were not decided in straight sets. So So I'm taking USC. They actually have some good wins on the season. They beat Washington twice, and Washington is really good this year. They also went 5 with Stanford, and they went 5 with Washington State, and one time, and then they also went 5 with Utah both times. Lost both times, but that's okay. They also beat Cal, which was an impressive team this year, but didn't make the tournament. So, yeah, I got USC winning the matchup against Stephen F. Austin. Yeah, and yes, and it's not because of coastal bias, but I just think SC has a little bit more in the tank. I think with players like Kalia Lanier, she does not want to see her season end just like that. She wants her season to go for at least one more round. Plus, Kalia Lanier is getting close to that all-time kill record from Sammy Bricio. So, the USC all-time kill record. So, who knows? Maybe Kalia Lanier will catch up, but we'll have to see. USC is full of talent, with like other players like Jasmine Groves. Hopefully, Brooke Botkin is back up to playing. So there's that. Now I'm going to try to go more rapid fire. So Marquette and Dayton, that was a tough one. Both these teams were very impressive this year. Dayton won their conference, while Marquette made it all the way to the conference finals, only to lose. I picked Marquette for this one just because Marquette did have that little slip up, slip up in the finals against St. John's, but I think they're going to get back on track. I think that loss just woke them up, and I think their losses to Creighton also woke up Marquette. So I got Marquette over Dayton, probably going 5. Next up is Wright State versus Purdue. Wright State has been up and down, and being in the Horizon League, it's kind of tough considering there wasn't a real clear-cut winner. Everyone thought Milwaukee was going to win the conference, and they lost to Oakland. And then, the Horizon League tournament started, and then, they lost in that as well. So, and then eventually Wright State won that tournament. I'm going with Purdue for this one. Purdue has that big 5-set win over Nebraska, and they play, again, this is a Big Ten conference team, which that's a Power 5 conference, and Purdue is just, they're loaded with talent. They definitely have talent across the board, so I pretty much got Purdue over Wright State. Then we have Kentucky over Southeast Missouri State. I got Kentucky winning this one. They are on a roll. They won the SEC, which is no easy feat. They even beat Florida at Florida, so no, it will be no surprise to see them rolling over. They did lose that one match to Texas State, but I think that was just one of those unusual matches, and we're human. People make mistakes. Now I've got Northern Kentucky versus Michigan. I'm going with Michigan for this one. Again, no, it's Power 5 bias, but Michigan is just such a good program. Michigan, by all means, is not a bad team. I think Michigan's good. They're nothing to sneeze at, especially when they're battle-tested in the very tough Big Ten with teams like Penn State, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, and Purdue. And, I think I think they'll be a little bit cut above. They'll be a cut above Northern Kentucky. Next, we got Colorado State and South Carolina. This one's another tough one. South Carolina from the SEC against Colorado State from the Mountain West. I'm taking the Mountain West and Colorado State just because Colorado State is one of the hotter teams out there. Their only loss of the season came against Cal, which, that was one of the more improved teams, which didn't make the NCAA tournament. But I will talk about the surprise teams that didn't make the NCAA tournament. So overall, I'm taking Colorado State, taking the Rams, I believe they're called. Next up is Winthrop versus Washington. This one's a no-brainer. I'm taking Washington for this one. Washington has been battle-tested. They even have that big upset win over Stanford. Granted, Stanford wasn't at full strength, but, it's always good when you take down Stanford. And, it all depends on which Washington team shows up to play. So we'll see how that goes. So those are my picks for the top top left-hand side of the bracket. Now let's go into the bottom left-hand side of the bracket. Nebraska versus Ball State. I love this story of Ball State winning their conference as the number 5 seed, but I just don't see them beating Nebraska. University of Northern Iowa versus Missouri. I got UNI winning this one. I got Northern Iowa winning this one barely. That's one of those pick'ems matchups, but overall, I got UNI winning that one. Now, San Diego versus Washington State. This was one of the more intriguing matchups. Washington State having beaten Washington twice this season, finishing 3rd in the Pac-12, which was very impressive. They take on a team that got hot in the second half of that's currently hot right now, being San Diego. They got hot in the first half of conference, and then that little slip up against Pepperdine. So yeah, I chose San Diego for this one. They're going to have a tough time, though. They have to face a Pac-12 team, and Washington State is no one to sneeze at. San Diego is talented with players like Grace Froling, Anna Newsome, Katie Lukes, but they're going to be forced out of their comfort zone when they play Washington State. That said, having played teams that's in a very tough conference, being the West Coast Conference, being BYU, Pepperdine, Santa Clara, I can see San Diego getting past Washington State. Now for Northern Colorado and Hawaii, I got Hawaii winning that one quite easy. Hawaii playing in Stan Sheriff Center is going to have an easy time. Hawaii's playing some of their best volleyball as of late. I was a little skeptical on them after they lost to UC Irvine, but overall, this team is nothing to sneeze at. When they are at home, it's basically the entire state of Hawaii versus your team. So, better hope you have a good cheering section. So, we already saw that Texas A&M and Rice won their matchups. UCLA versus Notre Dame. This is a very interesting matchup. ACC versus Pac-12. Pac-12, the Pac-12 team being UCLA has the Pac-12 Player of the Year being Mac May. Last year UCLA missed the NCAA Tournament. Last year they finished under 500, and they finished with a conference record of under 500. This year they're back into the NCAA Tournament. They also beat Stanford. They also swept their little rivalry series against USC this year. I'm taking UCLA for this one. I imagine it'll go 5, though. Wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame had to go 5 with UCLA. I mean, I can see UCLA just winning that one, though, because, it's not just Mac May. It's also Savvy Simo, Emily Ryan, I believe her name is, Devin Chang, Kelly Berry, and a few others running the show. So, and UCLA runs a pretty good 6-2 offense. So, I got UCLA over Notre Dame. Then we have Illinois State versus Wisconsin. I love Illinois State. Illinois State's story, but I gotta go with Wisconsin. Wisconsin is just way too good. This is their year. Other than that one slip up they had against Ohio State, this Wisconsin team is very... Oh, and Penn State, where they were up 2-0. This Wisconsin team is too good. They're not going to lose to Illinois State. Come on. All right, now for the top right-hand bracket, Stanford versus Denver. I liked Denver when they won their conference in the conference tournament at home, but I gotta go with Stanford. Stanford plays really well at Maples Pavilion. This will be in Stanford. So this will be at Stanford. So unfortunately, Denver, you're going to have a tough time winning at Maples Pavilion. Then we have Georgia Cal Poly. This one's very tough. I've seen Georgia play. I have also seen Cal Poly play. Both teams are really, they've been on the bubble. Cal Poly finished second in the Big West. Georgia finished, they finished third? Yeah, they finished third in the SEC they finished third in the SEC, which, that's pretty good. If you finish top 3 or top 4 in the SEC, you've got a pretty good team. I'm going with Cal Poly for this one. Again, it's not coastal biased or Big West bias. I think Cal Poly is just a little bit better than Georgia. I think Cal Poly being in California will be better prepared and will just have a little bit more in the tank. We'll have a little bit more in the tank in regards to their matchup against Georgia. And I've seen Georgia play. They kind of struggled against Long Beach State. They did beat Long Beach, but I don't think they'll have the same night against a Cal Poly team, especially with a very talented player such as Maya Dvoracek. And they also have and Cal Poly has Madeline Mercer as well. And I've seen Maya Dvoracek play. She is very good. Her serves are like cannonballs from cannons, and Madeline Mercer just dominates the middle. So I gotta go with Cal Poly for this one. So next up, we got Utah and Illinois. Very interesting matchup. 2 Power 5 conference teams, Utah being from the Pac-12 and Illinois from the Big Ten. I'm going to go with Utah for this one. As good as Illinois is, I'm very skeptical of Illinois. Illinois lost their final match of the regular season to Northwestern, and I think Northwestern finished near the bottom with Rutgers in the Big Ten. So I gotta go with Utah. I'm more comfortable with Utah. Again, it's not a coastal bias, but again, Utah is just good, man. Kenzie Korber is not playing games. No Xbox, broken Xbox, red ring of death. All water damage all day, every day. Next up, we got New Mexico State versus BYU. Western Athletic Conference versus West Coast Conference. I gotta go with BYU. I really doubt New Mexico State can hang with BYU. I'm sorry to all the WAC fans, but the WCC is just too good. And BYU having a standout victory against Stanford and having gone 5 with San Diego, I just think BYU is just, other than those 2 losses against San Diego, BYU is just good. And Mary Lake, they have arguably one of the best liberos in the nation, being Mary Lake. She is going places, man. I think she, as well as Morgan Hentz of Stanford, are the best liberos in the nation. And I probably will have I'd probably have them at top. If I had a top 5, I'd probably have those 2 in my top 5. I probably should have something like that toward the end of this season, so we'll see. We shall see. Speaking of really talented liberos, Penn State versus Princeton. I loved Princeton's story of winning a tiebreaker game at the end of the season against Yale, which didn't even make the NCAA tournament. But I gotta go with Penn State. Penn State has a very talented libero, being Kendall White, and they also have talented hitters such as Joni Parker. So I gotta go with Penn State for this one. Again, it's not a Power 5 bias, but I just think Penn State is just going to be too much for them. Princeton does have a few Southern California volleyball players, but I gotta go with Penn State. Penn State's just too good, man. Then we have American versus Towson. 2 conference champions. They're both facing one another, and the winner gets to face one of their more difficult matchups. American won the American Central Conference, while Towson won the High Point Conference, I want to say. Either the CAA conference, the CAA conference, yeah. So I've got American winning that one. I'm a little bit more comfortable with Towson or with American. Towson will give them a matchup, though. I think it'll be a battle between American and Towson, but I just think American, being in such a competitive conference because that American Coast Conference is pretty good. So I'm going with American over Towson. Probably a 5-set matchup, but we'll see. Then we got Cincinnati versus VCU. I want to. Yeah, that one was also a tough one to pick. I picked Cincinnati just because they were actually very good for this season, and then they had that slip up against UCF. But I think they redeemed themselves in their matchup against VCU. I expect that one to also go 5, but I think Cincinnati just barely wins that one. Cincinnati being battle tested this year in conference. I think they win that one. They win that one just barely. So, and I think Cincinnati being from the American Volleyball Championship I think they just have a little bit more in the tank than VCU, but we'll see. Then we've got Howard versus Pitt. I'm very surprised Pitt is not seeded higher. I think Pitt should definitely be seeded higher, considering they only have one loss in the season to Penn State. I know Pitt is the only ranked team in the NCAA, or was the only ranked team in the NCAA rankings for the most part. But I think Pitt should be seated higher. No doubt, I'm going with Pitt. There's no debate in that one. Then we have the bottom right hand bracket to finish things off. I'm going with Minnesota Fairfield. I got Minnesota winning that one quite easily. Minnesota, this is one of their better teams, and I think Minnesota's out to prove a lot, and I think they'll be able to. I think they'll be able to just tear through Fairfield. I think. And I think they're out to prove that last year was kind of a fluke, and they can hang with some of these teams. And Minnesota actually made it all the way to the NCAA final, which I believe was back in 2014 or 15, and they lost to Nebraska, I want to say. No, they lost to Stanford. They lost to Stanford in 2000, and I want to say it was 2015. I think it was 2015, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that was when Stanford had that really young team. But anyway, Minnesota's going to win this one. Iowa, Creighton. I have Creighton winning that one, no doubt. Creighton won the regular season, and then they had this big mess up against St. John's in the Big East tournament. There's no doubt in my mind Creighton wins. They have no business losing in the semifinals of that Big East tournament. So, and everything else is done with. UCF beat Florida State, Florida beat Alabama State, West Kentucky beat Kennesaw State, Stanford beat Louisville, UCSB beat Texas State, Louisville beat Stanford, and Texas beat Albany. So. Those are the matchups. Now let's get into some teams that I was surprised that didn't make the NCAA tournament. So, a few teams I am surprised that didn't make the NCAA tournament. The first one I am surprised at was South Dakota. They went 22-2 in overall, and then they lost to Omaha in their conference tournament, and then I guess that was just more than enough proof to not put him in the NCAA tournament. And South Dakota did make the NIVC, which is basically the NIT of volleyball. But South Dakota, it was a bit of a surprise. Now Georgia Tech, another team I was surprised that didn't make the NCAA tournament was Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, then they finished tied for second with with Florida State and Notre Dame in the ACC behind Pitt, and they didn't make the NCAA tournament, which that to me was very surprising. I thought Georgia Tech was going to get in. It's kind of disappointing, if you ask me. So overall, I don't know. That's a little. It's a little suspicious, but overall, that's quite the bummer for Georgia Tech. Another team that I was surprised did not see that did not make the playoffs was Pepperdine, which, Pepperdine, it's tough to make a case for them considering they didn't really have too many big standout wins. One of their standout wins, however, came against San Diego in conference play. That was San Diego's only conference loss. So, and I think that should have gotten them in right there. So, overall, I think Pepperdine should have gotten in, considering that win. And then, Pepperdine's has turned their program around. They used to be one of the not-so-good programs in the WCC. Now they're one of the better programs. And, they have some good, talented players, such as Shannon Scully and Hannah Froling. So, that's quite the shame right there. Then another team I was very surprised to see miss the tournament was Cal Berkeley. Cal was undefeated going into Pac-12 conference play. They did take a set off of Stanford twice, but they also had some tough, bad losses against teams like USC. They lost to USC twice. They lost to UCLA twice. They finished with 10 conference losses, and they also lost to, I want to say, they also lost to Colorado, which was near the bottom of their conference. So that's a bit disappointing, if you ask me. So I really think Cal should have made the NCAA tournament, but who knows? Then another team I was surprised to see miss the NCAA tournament was, not too big of a... Now, this was not too big of a surprise. These two teams were not too big of... was Green Bay and Milwaukee. Green Bay and Milwaukee both come from the Horizon League. They both missed the NCAA tournament. But you look at the Horizon League, it's not that big of a Power 5 conference like the Pac-12 and the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC is. So it's not overly surprising that... that Milwaukee and Green Bay didn't make the NCAA tournament. I think they should have, and Milwaukee was looking like they should have, especially when they were on that long winning streak, and then they lost to Oakland, and then, they just weren't the same. Milwaukee to me was like a mirror. Once it cracks, it's never going to be perfect again. So, overall, I really thought that Milwaukee there were high hopes for Milwaukee, and then they kind of underachieved toward the end, especially when it mattered most. So to me, it's a little surprising that Milwaukee and Green Bay missed the NCAA tournament, but not that surprising. So, because Horizon League is not that big of a Power 5, is not a Power 5 school. So, I'm sure there are more teams out there that should have made the NCAA tournament, but we'll see how it goes. Now before we wrap this up, let's get into the NIVC. Now, where I was on Wednesday, I was at the NIVC where Long Beach State, my school, got into the NIVC, and they made, which is the National Invitational Volleyball Championship. So that's where I was so happy when I heard that Long Beach State made the NIVC. I was also really happy that they were one of the host sites. So I was very surprised. I was very, very happy. I could not believe it. Some of the teams that made the NIVC were Alabama A&M, Boise State, which kind of was another team that was surprising of not making the NCAA tournament, Boston College, Another team that was a little bit of a surprise. Bowling Green, Central Michigan, Colgate, Georgia Tech, High Point, Houston, Kansas City, LaSalle, Liberty, Long Beach State, Miami of Ohio, Morehead State, New Hampshire, Northwestern State, North Carolina AT, Purdue Fort Wayne, Sam Houston State, Santa Clara, South Dakota, TCU, Troy, Tulane, Tulsa, UC Davis, University of Las Vegas, UT Arlington, UT San Antonio, Weber State, and Wyoming. The number one overall seed was South Dakota, so that was and currently, as of right now, and as for all the matchups, South Dakota beat Central Michigan 3-1. UNLV beat Kansas City 3-1. UT Arlington beat UTSA 3-2. Sam Houston State beat Houston 3-1. Santa Clara beat Long Beach State 3-2, which was quite the tough matchup. Tulsa beat UC Davis 3-1. Wyoming swept Northwestern. Weber State beat Boise State 3-1. Georgia Tech. I guess they haven't had these matchups yet. Georgia Tech faces Alabama A&M. Troy faces North Carolina A&T. Liberty faces LaSalle. High Point faces Morehead State. Bowling Green beat Purdue Fort Wayne 3-1. Miami of Ohio TCU beat Miami of Ohio 3-2. And Colgate faces Boston College, and Tulane faces New Hampshire. Some of those first round matchups will be tomorrow, and some of them, and some of the second round matchups will be on Sunday, which is kind of weird. It's so weird how some of these tournaments work, but I don't know, Why doesn't everyone just play on the same day? Then again, it could be like purposes of school work purposes or traveling purposes or something like that. I'm not part of the tournament committee, so I can't say. Overall, but I was impressed with how Santa Clara and Long Beach State fared. Santa Clara won the first two sets. Then Long Beach State won sets 3 and 4, and then it was close. Long Beach State had match point, and then this is a name you will definitely want to remember, being Julia Sangiacomo. She was a beast. She had 2 kills when Santa Clara was down 14-13, and then Michelle Pfeiffer, I want to say, had the match-clinching ace, or Michelle Schaefer had the match-clinching ace, which gave Santa Clara the match. That Julia Sangiacomo is really tall. She's 6'5", and when I interviewed her, I was so surprised. I felt really short. That's one of the first times I felt short around someone else. It's funny, actually. So that was my night. Tough loss for Long Beach State, but hats off to Santa Clara, and Sangiacomo is going to be a player to remember. 6'5". Woof. What are you parents feeding your kids now these days? But overall, that's going to do it for today's episode of Set Point. As my boy Larry B would say, cue the music, cause we're out of here. Once again, this is your boy Teran Rodriguez. I will be having a recap of all of Round 1's matchups and a recap of some of Round 2's matchups tomorrow for Set Point. Once again, this is your boy Teran Rodriguez signing out, y'all. Have a great rest of your weekend and enjoy some volleyball. Peace.